Good morning, Alison, and thank you so much for joining us at Marches Academy Trust this morning. You have had a real journey with your career that I've watched with great interest. And as a head, I felt that you were very brave and courageous in the work that you did at your school. Removing levels well before the government ever did. And now you champion schools and teachers on a very regular basis, which has been hugely supportive over particularly the last year. Having people like yourself with that message is so important. So firstly, thank you for that. I wanted to start off really with asking you, why did you become a teacher in the first place? Because we've all got that story, haven't we, about why we came into education. I'd love to hear yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much for asking me. Why did I become a teacher? Well, actually, I didn't like school myself as a child. I hated feeling part of a crowd that was just sort of herded around, and yeah, I just didn't really enjoy it. I didn't enjoy primary or secondary school particularly. Both my parents were teachers, so I grew up in a household where everything had always gone to school. You know, where's that? Oh, it's in school. You know, there was always a kind of sense of um, their careers and their enjoyment actually of working with children. And I knew I wanted to work with children,
Yeah.
but I sort of dismissed the career of teaching because my parents were doing it and because I didn't like school myself. And it was only when I was at university and I was looking to think, oh, actually, what am I going to do next? That I decided, hang on a minute, maybe I'd like to be a primary teacher. And I phoned my mum. I remember calling her and saying, Mum, I've decided to apply to Warwick University for my PGC. And she said to me, I knew you would. I knew
Oh,
this is where you
wow.
were going to end up. And I haven't looked back, to be fair.
Oh, that's amazing, because actually I've been trying to convince my daughter to become a teacher because I think she'd make an outstanding teacher. But she's absolutely at the moment insistent on not wanting to go into the profession. And I feel very bad about the fact that I might have given her a very wrong impression of the hard work of this profession, and she's not interested in it. So I've still got time then. She's still got time to change her mind by the sounds of it, because I made
Yeah,
my decision to go into teaching at sort of secondary school. I went to work experience during my A levels when I was at sixth form, and that's when I met a teacher that was a most amazing Joe Forward. And it was that moment where I looked and thought, I want to be her. I want to be you. You're just incredible. And like you, I didn't have good experiences at school. So it's quite interesting the amount of teachers I meet actually that have all gone into teaching because of that, because of their own experiences with education. So
well, because you want to make it better, don't you?
yeah.
I mean, that was absolutely what was when I decided that's what I was going to do. I was determined that my classrooms were never going to be places where people were frightened or humiliated. Or, you know, I was absolutely determined that my own experience should inform my teaching. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
brilliant. So in terms of you've been a huge driver, and particularly over the last year with the whole agenda of future education, and like where do we go now? And there's lots of discussion around that at the moment, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this is a moment where we can actually take a lot of reflection about what is going right in education and what we perhaps could change. And I'm really interested in your perspective of, what would you really like to see fundamentally change in education over the next couple of years because of what we've experienced over the last year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question, isn't it? Because on the one hand, people have had so much disruption over the past year. There's a sort of craving for doing the things that we always used to do, as if we could eradicate this experience. I don't think probably we can eradicate this experience. I think this has probably changed things forever in some ways. And so then there comes an opportunity to say, well, we've disrupted, for example, the examination system hasn't happened in the way that we would have expected it to. The inspectorate have not been able to visit schools in the way that we would have expected them to. You know, quite often prior to this, there was a burning platform in terms of what needed to happen with teaching, and there was almost a sense of if only we could stop the world and get off, then maybe things could get better. And then, oh, hang on a minute, the world has stopped. So this is an opportunity. It's a moment in time to reflect. So when we think, when we crave to pre-pandemic times, we have to be, we have to remember that actually prior to the pandemic, we had a third of youngsters at the age of 16 being told that they had failed, that the whole of their school career essentially had amounted to nothing. We had youngsters at the end of Key Stage 2 being told, sorry, you're not at national expectations, then being put on flight paths by some secondary schools being told you're doomed to crash by the time you reach 16. We had children in nurseries who were being grouped into so-called ability groups and being taught differently in terms of their experience based on what had already happened. So we had a very difficult, highly accountable system, and of course we always need to be held to account because we're using public money.
Absolutely.
But the system had gone too far, it strikes me. So the more that we can do to say, how can we kind of recalibrate? The issues around increasing mental health issues for young people, a third of teachers leaving after 3 years. These are really big issues that we can't ignore just because we're just carrying on that treadmill. That treadmill did stop for a bit.
Yeah. I think
so
it's that reset button. We've talked a lot about that in our trust about, so this is an opportunity to reset, isn't it? And you're absolutely right. But what we're noticing as well is that actually our children have changed. They aren't the children that were a year ago, and actually in some positive ways, in a sense of independently being able to access learning and drive an initiative with that, because they've had to, in their emergency learning at home, they've had to really just take that ownership of it. So there's positives to come from it as well. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right in the sense of, accountability is absolutely crucial, but it can be done, can't it, in a different way.
We have to be careful not to underestimate our children.
Absolutely, yeah.
So often what I was doing when I was, you referred kindly to my career as a head teacher, what I was doing there was really saying we need to challenge our children. We need to give our children the opportunity to show us what they can do constantly. And children love that. They love to kind of demonstrate, this is my personal best. Oh my goodness, look what I can do today. Look what I've achieved now. They love that. And I think because everybody was so worried about their performance and being able to come up to par with what they were expected, it kind of, ironically, that suppresses the whole workforce. Because we're all so busy trying to, looking over our shoulder, making sure if we're measured now, are we up to scratch? Are we doing a good enough job? And in doing that, we had a sort of vice grip around everything that was going on in schools. Just yesterday on social media, I saw a mother sharing the fact that her son, her 10-year-old son, had said, Mum, he'd come home in the evening and he said, Mum, do you know what? Schools just aren't bendy enough.
Oh, wow.
And of course, schools aren't bendy enough very often, are they? If you've been at home, as you say, working independently, you can actually choose, well, now's the time, I'm really going to crack on with this. I'm just going to go and get myself a drink, then I'm coming back. Classrooms are necessarily much more rigid. But that notion of pliability, flexibility, being able to respond to our learners is fundamental, I think.
Yeah. What an astute little person. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? And that's exactly what we've been talking about within the trust, about how we can develop that flexibility and have, breakout spaces where children are independently accessing pre-recorded learning opportunities, and how actually can we take this moment to really get creative. And I was a great fan of Sir Ken Robinson and his idea of that we're losing our creativity. And I think, you've just hit the nail on the head there with that sense of we do really need to be focused on what we can do now to change and adapt and move forward. And I've banned at our school the catch-up phrase. We're not allowed to use catch-up. It's about moving forward. We're reconnecting, re-establishing, reconfirming and informing the learning, and then we're moving on. And
so important.
Language is, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, otherwise it smacks of remediation.
Absolutely.
It smacks of, sorry, there's a whole, I mean, if we're going to think about that, then can we have Christmas again, please? Because, I didn't have Christmas in my house with my daughters. It was the saddest part of the whole pandemic for me. Well, no, it probably wasn't, but it was one of the things that was really, really struck. It was just so sad not to be able to be with family. Well, yeah, you can't regain lost time, but what you can do is reconnect, re-energize, and learn from the experience. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, and that's brilliant. That's what we need.
Absolutely. Do you miss being a head? Because obviously your influencer in, you're pollinating lots of wider things now in your role. But fundamentally, do you miss being in school and being a head teacher?
So I miss that sense of community, that sense of being with the children. But in my latter years as a head teacher, I was trying to work with the DfE, work with colleagues across the country, lead a teaching school alliance, and I constantly felt that whatever I was doing, I wasn't doing well enough. Wherever I wasn't, I wasn't in the playground, or I wasn't at a meeting, or, I felt as if I was being stretched in too many directions. And I made a decision at the point of coming to the Chartered College. I was either going to establish from the school where I was at a multi-academy trust based around learning without limits principles, or I was going to try and take on a national role and see what I could do to try and really champion the profession and support the profession and connect the profession to do the best that we can, and also raise our status, because
Absolutely.
so needed. It's so needed. And we do this. I know I spend a lot of time encouraging teachers, but actually what I'm really pleased to do is when I see schools working together, when I see colleagues working together, when I see them really kind of intellectualizing problems that have been long-term problems in schools and saying, well, what might we do differently? That really energizes me, because I think, yes, that's brilliant. So there's some work going on here with your schools, and there's some work going on over there, and how do we connect them up? And how do we try and make sure that our politicians are best informed of these things, so that
I think that's absolutely crucial. Yeah.
Yeah.
Working, I mean, it got fragmented for a while, I think, in terms of the system, local authority schools, some academy trust schools, and it all started to feel quite fragmented. But I'm hoping that actually over the next couple of years, there might be a rejoining of that collaboration grows and trust to trust work starts happening more fluently as well, because I think you're absolutely right. But I mean, and the work that you did, I mean, obviously I was coming down to the leadership advisory groups until we hit into the situation of lockdown. And I wanted to ask you, because I remember having a real imposter syndrome situation going on when I came to the first meeting, because I was sitting around a table with the likes of some very influential characters, key names in education. And it was almost a bit like a Blackadder moment, where I'd taken the wrong turning out of the toilet and then ended up in a meeting that I shouldn't have really been in. And I just wondered, with your role, does somebody as fabulous as yourself, Alison, ever get imposter syndrome? Or, because 10% Braver, I'm a great fan of, and Women Ed. Do you ever get that? Is that the same for us all?
Yeah, of course. I think it's perpetually. I mean, what we're really talking about is humility. I think the moment that one just expects to be in, in these situations, you're kind of lost, really, because I think there's so much responsibility. Those meetings I attend, for example, with ministers, there's such a responsibility, I feel, on my shoulders to try to convey the feelings of members of the Chartered College. That it does feel like that. I completely get it, but also there's something about the courage that you can gain from speaking up on behalf of, well, as a teacher, on behalf of my children, and also, last summer when we had that exams debacle, and you may have seen, I did a piece just on my camera on my phone and just said, come on, everybody, just sort yourselves out. This really isn't very fair. And it got tens of thousands of people looking at that. And that was directed at government. It was directed at DfE. It was overtly about saying, this is not good enough. Sort yourselves out, because children's lives are being compromised here. And that gives you the courage, I think, when you've worked with children all your career, to speak up, because you can see that there's an injustice. And the same is true now in the work that I'm doing. If I feel nervous, which I often do, I think, yes, but this is an opportunity. It's a platform. It's an opportunity to speak up on behalf of others. So just get on with it, Peacock. You'll be all right.
Get a grip. Yeah, I mean, I spoke to Jazz in one of our podcasts a couple of months ago, Opal Farr, and she's a TED talker, and I found her incredible. She's had a huge journey in her life, and she really champions teaching in the profession. And I think that word that you've just said in that being courageous, and you know, it's lovely. It's so refreshing and reassuring to have people like yourselves and Jazz that are willing to put your voices out there, because sometimes it can be a profession that you don't feel like you have a voice. You are dictated to and given something, handed down, get on with it. And I think that this is a moment. I've been working with the Fed recently on looking at that whole concept of like, let's take education back to the people that are trained professionals and we know what we're doing. And I think, you know, that the bigger the voice can be on that, the better. And, you know, you've been championing that for so long. So thank you. And I think it continues to grow.
Well, it's at the heart of what the Chartered College is all about. And of course, you know, we're working with Fed now to say, okay, we've had this summit. What can we take forward? And how do we work in a respectful way? You know, we're very clear that our role at the Chartered College is not the role of the unions. The unions have a very distinct role around the workforce, around the rights and conditions for teachers, and absolutely as it should be. And I would absolutely advocate that every teacher should be a member of their union and be active in that. But also, I also believe that every teacher should be a member of their professional body, because as we grow, the more teachers who we work with, whether they're teachers who are just starting out on their career or whether they are, you know, whether they're CEOs of multi-academy trusts, everybody has something to contribute along that way. And we want to really, you know, you talk about a sense of a lack of voice. It's much easier to be part of a collective calling for something than it is to stand up on your own.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard. And you know, when I was a head teacher, every time that we got the next outstanding judgment from Ofsted, the more I felt courageous. And there were always people who said, oh, well, it's all very well for you. But then they also, if they listened to me for 5 minutes, also knew that we'd come from bringing that school from special measures. So it wasn't always the case.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we can never forget that is that schools have got outstanding or good and outstanding. You know, there's been a huge amount of work and a journey that's gone on with that. And, you know, it's so important that we can continue to recognise and support actually the schools that do need that support to move to that direction and get that good.
But it should never be an endpoint. I mean, I think the work that we've done with the NAHT, for example, around thinking about accountability and school improvement, it's all about saying, actually, schools should have a higher set of goals than anything that any inspectorate is going to come and judge you on. And if they come and, you know, they find you wanting, essentially, if you've got a set of goals and a vision that you are working to that is about supporting every child, that's about a really high set of expectations, carry on with that vision, because that's what's really going to make the difference. And it's kind of a mug's game working to Ofsted's agenda. Obviously, you know, when I was a head teacher, I was very aware each time there was a new framework, I was very aware what are the kinds of things they're going to look at. But there is a degree of playing the game. And certainly there were times when, you know, I'd get a phone call, oh good, there's another inspection, there's another tomorrow. And I just remember on one occasion when Sir Michael Wilshaw was HMCI, he was absolutely adamant that every teacher should be observed every 5 minutes and all this. And so we were doing a lot of work on lesson study at the time, and I just took the folder that said lesson study in my office and just changed the title on the folder to monitoring. Straight away, we'd got something to hand to the lead inspector the next day.
Yeah. But you know that and one thing I love about the Chartered College is your Impact magazine, because it offers teachers a really accessible way of looking at that research-based approach. And for me, we don't use the term outstanding, we use excellence. But how can we continue to grow? How can we continue to get better on our agenda? And like you say, recognizing the framework, because you do have to recognize that's an accountability measure. But it's for us more about what is excellence for our children, and what does that mean for our children in our community, and how can we make sure they're successful, and basing our judgment and evaluation on success on that more so. But yeah, like you say,
I mean, I think the other thing is that whole kind of, the more that we support our teachers to be the best they can be, the greater the opportunity there is for the children they teach to really benefit from that. So I actually think that instead of talking about narrowing the gap, as has been, you know, for over a decade, we've kept on, and we know that until there's more funding to reduce poverty, that's never going to be sorted. So what we need to do is think, okay, what can we do to give our teachers the best possible careers, to feel supported, enabled, empowered, so that they can teach in a way that really fulfills their ambition, that stops them leaving after 3 years, that gives them a sense of making the difference they need to make. And then alongside other measures across society, that's the way I think we make the difference for those children who find it really hard to struggle against all of the other things that are set up against them from day dot.
That's
So,
it.
you know, it's again, the Charter College, from my point of view, this is why I'm so passionate about it, because it's not about sort of pushing our workforce to one side and saying, well, you're not good enough, start again. It's about saying you're absolutely good enough, but
Yeah.
there's more and more we could do together. And let's amplify your
Investing
achievement.
in them. You know, I mean, it was a profession sometimes that it was very variable depending on your school, whether you got invested in terms of CPD. And I know when I first came to Oak Meadow, you know, the teachers hadn't accessed any professional development for 15 odd years, you know. And so, you know, again, one of the things that I love about the impact is that it offers ideas, it's research based, it's actually real life stories. And then it really promotes that agenda of teachers continuing to do their own learning in,
And
you
to
know,
become chartered.
yeah,
So I'm excited now. So we've got a modular approach to this now. We've taken this all online. And we've got a module that's available now called Evidence Informed Practice. It's only £99 for people to sign up and do this. And they don't have to do the assessment at the end, but should they choose to, then that's a modular kind of approach towards becoming chartered. And it strikes me that's the kind of energy that we need across the profession. We need to take the profession back into our own hands,
yeah,
and stop waiting for someone else to tell us what to do.
yeah.
You know, we know what to do. We absolutely do. So let's build on that.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Before I go, I just wanted to ask, how did it feel to be recognised in regard to your damehood? Because must have been a significant moment for you. Did it feel that for you? How did you feel?
Of course it did. I mean, you talked about imposter syndrome. So I remember hearing about this. I was standing on the railway platform at Potters Bar. My school was in Potters Bar and I was going into London. I was on the platform and my mobile went off, and it was my husband. And he said to me, darling, there's a letter here with a stamp on the outside from the Cabinet Office. What have you done? I was like, what? I don't know. I said, I don't know, open it. And he opened it and he sort of said, oh, I think they're going to give you a damehood. And I just remember thinking, he'll have got it wrong. This, you know, this can't be true. And then, of course, when I got home and I read it, and you have to sort of, you know, accept and say, yes, if they were to offer it to you, would you accept, and so on. And then it was going to be announced on New Year's Eve. And I still remember thinking I couldn't bear to kind of look, because maybe there'd been a mistake and maybe my name wasn't going to be on the list. It has genuinely been life-changing, because it's given me courage. It's given me more courage.
Yeah.
And there have been times when I've received a lot of criticism for various things, typically from men, typically from, you know, sectors that are not primary. And it has given me the courage to think, yes, but I've looked in the eye of the Queen and she said, well done. So therefore, maybe I'm doing something right. So keep on going, Peacock.
Yeah, I am, and I am enough, you know.
Why not?
Yeah, and I thank you so much for ending with that, because that's real inspiration. You know, you have received criticism. I see that myself. I follow you on Twitter, and you know, and it pains me actually, because I think, you know, there are incredible people out there that are having a voice and being courageous and standing out there. And I think we've got a very judgmental world at the moment that needs to be stopped. And you know, everyone's got a right to have their view and their voice out there, and particularly when yours is so passionate and powerful about what is essentially, and what we found over the last year, to be, you know, crucial places in our community. You know, I think what's become very obvious over this last year, that schools are it, and we are really important, not only from an academic point of view, but for so much more. And I think that I'm hoping that grows and grows and becomes more obvious to certain people in the future. But your voice and what you do help to continue to put that out there. So thank you so much.
I work for a great team, Carla, and I think when people are critical, it's really important to understand where they're coming from. And there's always a grain of truth in all of that. You have to learn from those moments. But, you know, also we have to forgive them anyway.
Yeah. Thank you so much.